This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Gut check Saturday on the road for Alabama and Auburn. The Crimson Tide are in the swamp of Gainesville for the SEC on CBS game of the week, 2:30 against Florida. Brian Harsin gets his first real test as Auburn's new coach. Welcome to Happy Valley with 107,000 rabid Nittany Lions fans. The entire college football world is still buzzing about the miracle at Doak Campbell Stadium. Jacksonville State pulls off the last-second upset with a desperation heave. We're going to go inside the play that made the Gamecocks season and talk to the players who made it happen. It's a tough time to be a college athletic director nowadays. Name, image, and likeness, conference realignment, COVID-19. There's a lot to talk about. And we dive into all of that with Alabama's man in charge, Greg Byrne. Our exclusive one-on-one interview with him is coming up. Welcome into College Football Saturday, the first of a full slate on the 2021 season. Chris Brees, glad to have my man Jim Dunaway back with us. The next round live, you guys are taking off, and you're talking a lot of college football, too.
Oh, man, excited for today. You don't know how well your boat is built until you put it in the water. And today, Auburn puts their boat in the water. And really, a young Bryce Young finds out how good his boat is with that O-line for Alabama on the road. So it's a day to find out if your ship will sink or if it's good for rough seas ahead.
One thing we're going to find out today, the one question is nobody has any idea what to expect, what's going to happen. Both games on the road, and CBS 42 is everywhere across the country on this Saturday. We have team coverage from Gainesville. Taylor Kaufman's down there live. We'll get to her in a little bit. Dee Jackson is covering Jacksonville State right now for us in their game against North Alabama coming up a little bit later on tonight. We have to start, though, with what's going on down in Gainesville. You know, Alabama goes into this game a 14.5-point favorite. Everybody thinks it's going to be a massive beatdown, but why would that not be the case?
It would not be the case because if you go back to the SEC championship last year, Florida played Alabama as good as anybody else in the nation did. And this Florida team's very different. About 50% of the talent they had last year, but Alabama replaced a lot of the O-line. The matchup to watch today, Alabama's rebuilt offensive line against that front seven of Florida, and how much Todd Grantham will turn up the heat on the quarterback, Bryce Young.
The one stat they love right there at the bottom. In Gainesville, they are 8-2. That's what they're going to hang their hats on. But veterans on this team, they may be lacking in 2021. Taylor Kaufman out there live in Gainesville with what Alabama's been talking about all weekend long. Taylor.
Hey, Chris. Yeah, we have Alabama fans lined up behind me. This is where the team's going to come through here in about 30 minutes. Nick Saban was unhappy with his team last week going into the Mercer game with their lack of focus, lack of inattention at practice. But this week, hopefully things are different as it's an SEC championship rematch here in Gainesville.
We've had a lot better energy, a lot better focus, really practiced a lot better. So I'm not disappointed in the way we're preparing for this game. We're going to play a really good team in the SEC and a tough place to play.
We've heard all about the swamp, especially from us coming from the West Coast. Even in California, we've heard about the swamp and what a hostile environment that's going to be.
And you know people want to knock you down. It's just like you got to stand up for yourself. Always, you got to stand your ground. And that's what we come to Alabama for.
They're really experienced up front. As far as D linemen and linebackers, and they also have some experience in the secondary. They're really good in the secondary, really versatile. They can run, so it's a really solid defense.
They do have a two-quarterback system. I don't think you prepare differently. You know, both guys have ability to make plays passing, and they run the same sort of quarterback runs with both guys. We're certainly looking forward to the challenge because will, kind of tell us a little bit about who we are, where we are, where we got to go, what we need to do to get there.
I think it's more anticipation. I just can't wait for them to play, and I just can't wait to see Alabama football.
That was Alabama quarterback Bryce Young's dad. We'll hear from Craig Young a little later in the show. Brees, back to you.
Taylor, thanks so much. You know, when you think about Florida and Alabama, the days of Jim McElwain still ring in Florida fans' heads. You got to think that. But when Dan Mullen comes in, you got to think that this team believes they should be competing with Alabama. The question right now is, do they have the talent to do that today?
Yeah, they do have the talent. I don't know if it's just ready and ripe on the vine right now for it to happen. I do believe Anthony Richardson is the future at Florida. He'll be a championship quarterback probably in his time with the Gators or somewhere down the road. He's got that kind of skill set. I don't know if he's ready today for the start. Emory Jones is the guy I would expect to go first. But I would give him a big, heavy dose if I was Florida of Anthony Richardson, because he does remind me a lot of Nick Fitzgerald and what Dan Mullen did with him in Starkville.
And very unfair to give the Tim Tebow correlation there right now. It's the kind of style they definitely want. And for Alabama, I think we're still waiting to see who the superstar is going to be to break out and take over games, because you got, JoJo Earl could be the guy, Mechie could be the guy, Brian Robinson. Bryce Young, you may call him the best quarterback in the SEC, but who's going to show up, and that might be a difference for this team today.
Yeah, I expect at some point you would see Bryce Young run the football more than we saw in the Miami game. That's still a bullet they have in the holster there. But I do expect Alabama to start using that four-headed monster running back room that they have. And I look for them to try to run the football today on the Florida Gators and try to establish that offensive line as one of the best in the league.
It is going to be loud in Gainesville, and it's definitely going to be loud tonight, 6:30 Central Time in Happy Valley, Pennsylvania, when Auburn gets their first legit test under Brian Harsin as the new head coach, because let's face it, you're not going to learn much in games against Alabama State and against Akron. For this team, everybody is talking about how awful, I mean really bad, they have been against top 10 teams. Look at this since 2011. 34 games, they're 9-25 overall. Went 0-3 last year, probably a big reason why Gus Malzahn got fired. You see that stat at the bottom? They're 3-4 against the number one team in the country. I think Alabama and Georgia will be the reason for that. So this Auburn team, yes, you can say they've had issues on the road playing in big games, but that's why Brian Harsin got hired, right? They want to change the mentality of how they feel on the road, and that all begins tonight.
Part of playing on the road, in a big crowd, you do have crowd noise. You do need to deal with that, but it's all the other things too. Be a guy that embraces that. Enjoy the opportunity to play in somebody else's house and to go in there and play good football.
It's gonna bring a lot of energy to our team being in that stadium. It's gonna be a good atmosphere, and we prepare when we're ready to go out there and handle our business.
To me, it's more really about the mindset that you take into the week and what you have as you look forward to playing on the road and somewhere else. It really starts upstairs, and it's already begun.
Our preparation going into this game is going to be the same as it's been in camp and these past two previous weeks for the two opponents we played. So we're just going to go out there, we're going to do what we do. Not going to do anything special, change up anything. We're just going to go out there, play Auburn football, fast and physical, and the result, y'all going to see the results.
It comes down to the maturity of our team, the leadership of our team, and people come out of nowhere when all of a sudden you're gonna play in a game on the road against Penn State, and the guys just have to be mature enough not to listen to all that and stay focused on the things that we've been doing that have got us to where we are right now.
In 8 years under Gus Malzahn, you could make the argument that it was same old story on the road. Too conservative on the play calling. When are we going to open things up and figure it out on offense? Does this team have that ability right now, though?
I don't know if they've got the playmakers on the edge to do that, but they may have the best running back in the country. And you would expect tonight's game to look a lot like what Penn State's game with Wisconsin looked like. And in that game, Wisconsin's offense didn't score a lot of points against Penn State, but they were in the red zone with scoring opportunities a lot, and they turned the ball over, or they missed field goals, or they had field goals blocked. That's where Auburn, when they get those scoring opportunities tonight, will have to end up taking advantage of those. I think they will lean on Tank Bigsby a lot. That calms Bo Nix down when Tank's able to run, and I expect you see Tank used more in this game than he has the last two games combined.
And he needs help from Bo Nix, just like every other time out there as well. Auburn's defense is going to get a heavy dose of two fantastic wide receivers, Jahan Dodson and Parker Washington. Now, this has been a defense that keeps this team in games lately. Sean Clifford, is he the kind of guy who can expose any kind of weaknesses.
Well, I think you get a lot of the same type quarterback in both Bo Nix and Sean Clifford, and both of them have had really good wins at home. They've had some disasters on the road, so you get a lot here. For me in this matchup, Dotson is the guy that's going to try to take the top off the Auburn defense. I really love the Auburn secondary. I think they'll neutralize Dotson. I'm more worried tonight about the running game and what they're able to do with that Auburn defensive line, who still's yet to prove to me that they're up to Auburn defensive line standards.
And when Auburn won these games under Gus Malzahn, it was miracles at the end of the game for them to win. You're talking kick 6, the Georgia game in 2013 as well. Kind of like what happened to Jacksonville State at Florida State last week, the play everybody is still talking about. We're going to get an inside look at this last-second Hail Mary at Doak Campbell Stadium coming up. And these Alabama fans are already out in droves in Gainesville. They are an hour ahead of us, about 1:15 Eastern time right there. They are awaiting the Walk of Champions. Alabama set to arrive in about 15 minutes.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Here's the snap. Throwing the deep bomb down the far sideline. Caught ball at the 10-yard line to the 5-yard line.
Are you serious?
Jacksonville State with no time left.
I just said keep everything in front of you.
The Gamecocks have taken the lead and will win this ball game.
You can hear the pure disbelief in the voice of Florida State's Gene Deckerhoff on that miracle Hail Mary on Saturday that gave the Gamecocks the win over Florida State and handed the Seminoles their first ever loss to an FCS school. That was the kind of game that can define a program if you're Jacksonville State in the FCS. And D. Jackson spent some time there in Jacksonville today to get an inside look at what went down on that play, that miracle. D's live in Jacksonville right now.
You know, Breeze, one of the funny things about all college football programs, the majority of them anyway, have this 24-hour rule. And if you're unfamiliar with the 24-hour rule, whether they win or whether they lose, they only talk about it for 24 hours after the game. Well, I got to tell you, this play and this particular win for Jackson State, a monumental win for these guys, and they're going to be talking about it from here until forever. Now, one thing that we did notice, though, in watching this team play last week when they beat Florida State, I talked to some fans. They say it was two different, completely different teams from when we saw them in week 1 against UAB from the miracle that was in Tallahassee.
That one will go down in the history books, you know. I mean, it'll be something they tell the grandkids about.
But as far as DMs and retweets and tags, it's been crazy.
Some may call it crazy, some may call it unbelievable, or even miraculous. But there is no mistaking how Jacksonville State shocked the college football world last week in Tallahassee with its 59-yard touchdown toss viewed around the world.
You know, I took calm cadence, took the snap, and I just launched it. The next thing you know, I see him catch it. And after that, I'm thinking like, okay, field goal, field goal, field goal. So I look at the clock, it said 0, 0, 0. As soon as I looked back down, all I saw him was crossing the field and scoring.
Davon Phil Johnson considers himself a super senior. Jacksonville State fans consider him a superhero, being on the receiving end of one of the most spectacular plays in school history.
DJ did a good job of catching the ball, but also just not getting tackled, just having the presence of mind to make the cutback. But you just can't put a price tag on what that excitement meant. And
it wasn't just a me thing. I had an O-line who was blocking the quarterback. Then I had a Ahmad who came and gave the saving touchdown block as well. So I just made it a point to celebrate the team and not just myself.
For Phil Johnson, it has never been about him. The Pensacola, Florida native and Duke grad entered the transfer portal hoping to be picked up by the team he grew up rooting for. You guessed it, Florida State. But what made the outcome so much sweeter was Phil Johnson's family was able to see it firsthand in person for the first time, including his mother.
She never was able to come to North Carolina. It's a 13-hour drive, and then my siblings was there as well. They haven't seen me play a college game ever. They haven't seen me play football besides on TV since in high school, which was almost 6 years ago.
Now that JSU has climbed the mountain, they fully accept the responsibilities that come along with it, starting this weekend with North Alabama.
I mean, it's good to have a target. I mean, that goes to show that we're the topic of conversation with the other teams, but like I'm telling my teammates and our coaches telling us, we really can't, dwell on the Florida State game.
They're coming in here to play Jacksonville State, and not just Jacksonville State, the team that just beat Florida State. So they'll be jacked up and ready to play. So we got to get ready for that.
And Jackson State certainly ready for tonight's contest against North Alabama. And they talked about being the talk of the town. They are the talk of the country right now, and hopefully they can ride that wave of momentum. Brees, let's send it back to you.
All right, DC in a little bit. And of course, you know that moments like this bring out viral sensations. Jim, go ahead and caption this.
You mean to tell me the school that just beat us is not from Jacksonville, Florida? That's what that expression is.
Give me a map, please, because I'm not quite sure what just happened. I'm not quite sure where this team is from. People say this all the time. Chris, is this you back when Michigan lost to Michigan State in 2015? It was me walking through the studio back then.
You remember who called you instantly when that happened?
Jimmy Landmine?
Yeah, I called you from the house.
You landmined me in that game. You said, good win, my friend. And then you, of course, were at this game.
I recognize that one. That's kick 6. That's the old, I cannot believe Alabama just lost the football game and all these people are running onto the field. The Surrender Cobra is universal, though, isn't it?
Why do we? It's just like, I'm going to give up on life, and I can't believe what's happening right now. And there's going to be a moment like that throughout the entire season. Whoever ends up happening for them, good for them on their team. It could be tonight for Alabama or for Auburn, who knows. This Jacksonville State team, you got to realize that they're moving conferences to the ASUN, whole new schedule. It's a team who, a moment like that, you got to think they can build off of that, right?
Oh, absolutely. And Jacksonville State has a great history. They've beaten Ole Miss before. This isn't something new for them. They've won national championships at the Division II level. But this program, what happened to them in Week 1 against UAB, you started to think to yourself, oh my goodness, this is not going to be your typical quality, deep FCS playoff run for JSU. But then you bounce back and you get this kind of game. And this is the kind of game that John Gross really could use to settle into a really special season over in East Alabama.
The quote of the night was John Gross, the coach, saying, guys, Florida State just paid us $400,000 to lose to an FCS team. We're going to run with that for the rest of the year. Jacksonville State had a rough game against UAB a few weeks earlier. We weren't sure what the Gamecocks were going to be like in 2021 before that. And UAB's got a game at North Texas. Let's forget about that blowout last week to Georgia. This turnover chain, that Dragon Skull, did you see that?
I did. It's unique. I don't think you can wear that anywhere else except on the sidelines after a big play.
Sounds like a future story on College Football Saturday. They're hoping to right the ship. Georgia, that game was just a disaster. It doesn't count with all the talent that they have. North Texas, Conference USA opener, that's all that matters.
Looking ahead, this is, as we say when we play conference games, they're Super Bowls. They're Super Bowls for the opponent, they're Super Bowls for us. North Texas I think they're greatly improved. Now, we didn't get to play them last year. Coach Luttrell does a great job.
I just think this is a big challenge for Bill Clark to get his team up to flush what happened last week in Athens.
And everybody expects them to win this game, and that may change mentality just a little bit. In the FCS, Sanford begins league play in the Southern Conference, and we just can't figure out this team. Yet again, the Bulldogs had a massive lead, 17-0 at UT Martin, and they lost. Like so many times in the past, like 2020's season in the spring. So today at Western Carolina, maybe it can be a clean slate for a Southern Conference championship run.
Very new Western Carolina team. They got a brand new staff that I'm very familiar with. Not the same team we played back in the spring, but boy, we really had a good focused week of practice. I think our guys are excited to put the UT Martin game behind us and move on to conference play.
Dogs and Catamounts kick off in about an hour. Full highlights on the College Football Saturday post-game show after Alabama and Florida State. Okay, up next, a dramatic rescue. I'm sure everybody's seen this by now. This cat gets heroically rescued by a couple of fans at this game. It ended well for everybody, but you may not know the actual end result for a couple of people in the stands there. And before we go, we are awaiting Alabama's arrival and got word that they are in some massive traffic. Gainesville is known for that on College Football Saturdays there in that town. So Alabama's arrival, we'll bring that to you live whenever it happens. We'll be right back.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
So Miami almost lost at home last week to App State, but here's the only highlight you need to see. A stray cat. How he got in there, we have no idea. Hanging from the rafters, you hear a few gasps when a few fans smartly take an American flag. It was 9/11, thankfully, to catch it safely. One of the fans, even, the best moment of all, Jim, you saw this? Lion King's the cat, like little Simba.
Yeah, a great moment. The players were wondering why. It's a timeout. Why is everyone cheering? The cat decided, Brees, I've got 9 lives. This has been a good one. I'm going to cash in on this one and take the next 8. But somebody's there to save him, and it was really good.
So many questions. I guess that, cats land on their feet, but man, that was like 70 feet. That thing probably would have died.
Every time I watch it, though, I gasp when the cat lets go because it's hanging on. It's like one of those posters that you guys are too young to remember this, but back in the 90s, there were these things called posters, and every one of them had a cat saying, just hang on, or hang in there, those type of motivation posters. It's exactly what that cat looked like. It was a poster moment. Throwback to the 90s.
The cat bit 3 people, by the way, but that's because a vet said he had a displaced hip, and he got angry when it went back in place, bit 3 people, ran away, and everybody lived literally happily ever after. All right, let's go back down to Gainesville, Florida. Taylor Kaufman is there. Taylor, you got into town yesterday, and a pleasant surprise, you were able to talk with a man who's very popular nowadays around the Alabama realm.
Absolutely. That had to have been, by the way, the wildest day of that cat's life. I'm here. The Alabama team's going to be coming down this road here soon. We have fans lining up, waiting for their arrival as they make their way into this stadium. Like you were saying, when Alabama pulled into town, got to their hotel, I did get a chance to talk with Bryce Young's dad. Here's what Craig had to say ahead of today's game.
We've heard all about the swamp, especially from us coming from the West Coast. Even in California, we've heard about the swamp and what a hostile environment that's going to be.
As the Tide came rolling into town, so did the support of their fans.
Roll Tide!
Roll Tide, roll! Number 1, Alabama has a tough test here in Week 3, playing 11th-ranked Florida in the swamp. And there's still some questions around the Tide's young offense, led by sophomore quarterback Bryce Young.
The way that he copes with pressure is being prepared. And I think he's always done a good job of preparing himself and sacrificing, and then he's being prepared by the best coaches in the country. So when you're prepared, the pressure becomes minimized a little bit.
Bryce may not feel too nervous heading into the game, but his dad is a different story.
I think as a parent, you're always a little bit nervous, but not nervous in the sense that I doubt the ability of the team. It's just more. I think it's more anticipation. I just can't wait for him to play, and just can't wait to see Alabama football.
Has anything surprised you with the trip down to Gainesville?
Not yet, but it's hot like I expected. It's humid like I expected. So far, it's been on script.
We're still waiting for Alabama's arrival. They might be a little late. We'll cut in whenever they get here. We'll be back with our College Football Saturday coverage after the break.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
We mentioned off the top of the show, Jim's new venture, The Next Round Live. This thing has taken off, and man, you guys are having so much fun.
We are, man. We own the company, and the response has been really great at Next Round Live on Twitter and on YouTube. Go follow us, and we love interacting with everybody.
And what's so fun about you, Lance, and
Ryan
Brown, guy we play golf with all the time?
Yep.
What's so fun is your interaction with people every day of the week.
Yes.
And some of these comments are just fantastic. And you had a comment that you were reacting to Joel Klatt, one of your good friends, about who he thought were the best coaching jobs around the country right now.
Yeah, and I didn't hate Joel's list, but he had Texas number 1. And, I like the Texas job, but how is Texas the number 1 job? I mean, you can make a case for Ohio State, but Alabama's a pretty good job, And LSU wasn't in there at all. The last 3 coaches at LSU have all won a national championship.
And so you think about what you said, and you got a couple of responses here. This one's fantastic. This guy says Texas A&M number 1. I mean, they had no problem paying Jimbo Fisher $9 million for that fantastic win against Colorado.
Yeah, they do have a lot of oil money, so they'll spend that. And on my comment about LSU, Mike bounced in and says, yes, if Coach Saban has stayed at LSU. And that's a great point.
Mike with no profile picture, by the way. So it's an interesting conversation. You can look at it two ways. Historically, what are the best coaching jobs? And right now, what are the best coaching jobs? Two very different lists.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, USC, when I was growing up, was one of the, if not the best coaching jobs in all of college football.
Now, no way.
Now, where do you put it? No way, because the facility is not what it is at a place like Clemson, Alabama, Georgia, like that. But it still is very attractive. So as you see the Alabama folks rolling into Gainesville, we'll talk more about that in a second, but Alabama's got to be in any discussion about great jobs.
Yeah, whether it's right now or it was back in the day, Alabama historically, I mean, the number of national championships with or without Nick Saban.
That's right.
Still makes it a great job. Now, if Nick Saban never came around, you would still say that Alabama's a good historical job. Now it's the best job in the country. You can't even argue that. I would say historically the best jobs in the country, Alabama, Ohio State, USC, Oklahoma, Texas, Notre Dame. That's historically.
Yeah, you know, and I think you have a good order there when it comes to Notre Dame. Texas is and should be a really good job, and they've got money, they got, you know, support, and they've got it recruiting. USC is in a big entertainment capital with name, image, and likeness. The next coach really needs to capitalize on that in recruiting and sort of attract people to USC by saying, hey, you want name, image, and likeness? We're better to do that than in the 90210 or in Hollywood or in SoCal. So if I would be excited if I was the next coach at USC. I think the opportunity is there to have a rebirth in Southern California.
And it goes back to the argument of what college football was like in the 90s and the 80s and what it's like now. Kids don't care that USC and Michigan and Nebraska were fantastic in the 80s and the 90s. They care that Clemson's relevant now and Dabo Swinney's a cool guy.
Yep.
They want to play for Kirby Smart in Georgia. It's a vastly different conversation nowadays.
Yeah, look at the three quarterbacks at Ohio State, Clemson, and Alabama. They're all from USC's backyard. They're all from SoCal, and they all chose to come east there. Clemson's interesting. But, you know, for me, just a few years ago, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, Pete Carroll, that dynasty he had going for a short period at USC, the kids who are being recruited now, they don't remember Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart. Hard to believe, but they were like 4. Right?
That's
they were
sad
4.
to say.
They
When
were
I'm
5.
in my mid-30s, and I feel like I was old when they were playing.
Yeah.
By the way, that was the referees, we're told by very reliable sources, still waiting on Alabama.
You need those for a good game, though.
Get to Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. We're going to bring that to you when we can. Meanwhile, coming up after this, Bo Nix on the road. We mentioned it, how awful they have been. What's the problem? How can Bo get it fixed? It's coming up next. And before we go, our Week 2 player spotlight, someone Nix would love to find early and often tonight. Wide receiver Demetrius Robertson, the transfer from Georgia, 3 total touchdowns in that win over Alabama State last week. We'll be right back.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Bo Nix has had some wonderful moments as Auburn's quarterback the last couple of years. Basically, all of them are at home, though. Look at the way he has performed at home against on the road. At home, 22-3 touchdown to interception ratio. On the road, 10-10. That is not going to cut it tonight when they are in Happy Valley. And on Jim's show this week, Nix talked about what makes road games more of a challenge.
It gets loud enough to where your voice can't be heard and nobody else can be heard. It's just to where it gets so loud to where you just can't hear anything. And no matter, like, it can't even get louder because you just can't hear anything. So that just affects communication and especially on the field communication when you can't go up to someone's ear and speak to them and communicate with them. So it's definitely one of those things that only thing that can compare is experience.
2 years ago, when Bo Nix beat Oregon, I think everybody assumed that he was going to be the next great superstar.
That's right.
We're more than 2 years away now from that. Is he even in your top 5 right now?
He is. He is number 5, and that may be controversial, but he is a veteran quarterback, and so far so good. If Bo keeps playing like he's playing, he's going to stay a top 5 quarterback. We'll learn a lot about the maturity of Bo Nix tonight. JT Daniels, number 4 for me. Didn't play against UAB when they started throwing the ball deep. I got to see JT He was number 1 to start the year. I got to see him throw the ball deep and use those receivers. Here's my new star,
newcomer,
man. Will Levis. They love this guy in Kentucky, right? Kentucky couldn't throw the ball anywhere forward. They made longer passes on the basketball court before Levis got to town. Now the Penn State transfer is really good. Bryce Young, can't put him number 1 yet, but he's got room to move up there. Love what Bryce Young's doing, especially before the snap, getting the blocking on blitzes ready. He's one of the best in the country against the blitz. But right now, this guy's a star. Matt Corral, they're so fast. The receivers are good. They've got running backs that can catch it. Lane Kiffin calling plays. I got to go Corral 1, Bryce 2 right now.
Yeah, Bo Nix has to be on the list for everybody just because he's won big games. I mean, you can say all the criticism you want about Bo Nix. He has won big games. That's all that matters. I actually would put him ahead of Will Levis.
Wow.
Since Levis is so new, this is because he's so new. Missouri, yeah, it's a conference game. Not exactly thrilled and think that's going to be an answer for Kentucky. I got Nix next because of, again, he's beaten Oregon, he's beaten Alabama. You've got to put him on this list. JT Daniels has the potential, and he has all the headlines, and everybody said he's going to be a great quarterback. That's really my reason why he's on this list. We'll see if Georgia has some big games ahead this year. Bryce Young, because he's only started in 2 games. That's why he's not my number 1. He could easily be number 1. But Matt Corral right now, just what he did last year in a shortened season, has to be up there right now because he has the resume that Bryce Young doesn't have. But again, that can change.
Boy, that game now all of a sudden, if Alabama survives here today on CBS 42 against Florida,
2 weeks.
I'm really excited for Ole Miss, Alabama, and Tuscaloosa to see what Corral does with this Alabama defense.
You got to think it would likely be an SEC on CBS game of the week. All right, and Alabama playing quarterbacks today for Florida. We had hit on this a little bit earlier about how, we're not really sure who's going to be playing much in this game. Emory Jones is expected to be the starter. Anthony Richardson is the new up-and-comer who likely will take over this team at some point. And when you ask Dan Mullen, hey, who's your quarterback going to be this week? I don't expect a direct answer.
We kind of go in with a plan, depending on the game, and we kind of schedule the plan off of each deal. And, there are some circumstances maybe that would change that. But, everybody's kind of on plan going into the game that, hey, you're going to play the 3rd series.
Very cryptic answer there. Fair or not, Richardson's already received comparisons to Tim Tebow light. If he lives up to half that hype, Mullen may have his quarterback of the future right now. All right, more on Alabama coming up a little bit later on in the show, but D. Jackson had an excellent chance this week to talk to one man with CBS Sports who knows a little bit about Alabama and Florida. D.
I got to tell you guys, the best part about this show, my favorite thing, is that we have so many experts. We've got Jim Dunaway, Chris Breeze, and of course, Brian Jones is a man who watches college football extensively. Had a chance to catch up with him to talk about what's ahead for Alabama and for Auburn.
There's going to be a few growing pains, but the great thing about Alabama, they're on autopilot. They just plug in another 4 or 5 star, and they keep winning ball games. That leadership will eventually emerge, and so they will be just fine. You look at the stats, though. They're not running the rock. They're about 30 yards below what their average was a season ago. They are still passing it with great efficiency. Bryce Young, of course, taking over. But I think the leadership will eventually emerge, and they'll probably have to lean on that running game a little bit more as teams try to corral Bryce Young and these excellent wide receivers.
Brian, you got the big game, Alabama versus Florida. Who do you like in this one?
Well, you got to go with Alabama. As I said on our show the other night, you can count on Nick Saban having his squad ready, just like you can count on that Hotel Iron leaking all over your clothes. I think it's going to be a good ball game, a competitive ball game. You look at what Florida's been able to produce in the running game. They've gone from number 1 in passing in the nation to number 1 in rushing, and that was going to be one of the focuses this coming season is how would they be able to run the ball, losing a talent like Kyle Trask, who's now with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and losing all those receivers, and of course Kyle Pitts to do everything at tight end.
Okay, Brian, shifting gears now, talking about Auburn at Penn State, and I know you're a little bit biased because you got a crush on these linebackers. That's okay. I know you like these Penn State linebackers, but what is it about this team that really could be a big thorn in the side of quarterback Bo Nix? What does Auburn have to do to gain the edge?
Well, I tell you what, I like Tank Bigsby a ton as well. This guy proved as a true freshman last year that he is a bona fide SEC running back, and he's one of the best in the nation. So it's going to be a wonderful viewing session, Tank Bigsby versus these linebackers for Penn State, because they're very active, and they've got 3 or 4. They're very interchangeable. Sometimes they line them up at rush in, sometimes they're at Mike backer, Will backer, but there's 4 or 5 of those guys that play with force, and that's what I like to see. And you know, these Auburn cats, they know that's the SEC way. So James Franklin has some guys over there that force the issue, and they tackle well. And they're not going to bat 1,000. No one does. Those other teams across the line of scrimmage, they have scholarship players as well. But it should be a great test for Auburn and Brian Harsin, who wants to play physical football. He brought that same mentality he had at Boise State. They play physical, run downhill football, and we'll see how that shakes out. And you mentioned Bo Nix. Doesn't have a great track record on the road. This is going to be a very hostile environment. He should be used to that. Now, his 3rd year in the SEC, but that whiteout at night in Happy Valley is going to be tremendous. And we'll see how he plays now being under new management. Mike Bobo, his 3rd OC in 3 years, if he can stay within the framework of that offense and his mechanics and play well against this secondary for Penn State. It should be a hell of a ball game, and I'm really looking forward to that one.
And it could be a statement game for Bo Nix. Guys, let's send it back to you.
All right, Dee, thank you very much. Here's the aforementioned Alabama arrival at Ben Hill Griffin Stadium. You got to think Nick Saban is just fuming right now for a man who loves staying on a schedule. What? They're 19 minutes late.
Yeah, 19 minutes behind the schedule. Somebody's going to pay for that. When Florida comes back to Tuscaloosa, you can count on their buses being stuck on McFarland for hours.
You were up close and personal, shoulder to shoulder with Coach on the radio show on Thursday.
Yeah, we had a really good conversation in the commercial breaks, and a lot of it was about that Florida offensive scheme and how the 2 different quarterbacks aren't really that different in preparation. He likes his team. He likes the plan. He really likes finding out what he's got this year. He's looking forward to this game today.
He likes his coordinators. There they go right there. And here comes the first-team offense. Alabama is no stranger to these hostile environments on the road. Many of these players aren't, though, and that's the big question, if they are ready for a moment like this.
Yeah, I mean, just think about it. Last year, there was no real environment like this.
Completely different from what they're seeing now.
And the Swamp will be special today, but luckily it's not a night game. It's a little different at night in the SEC than it is at 2:30. That's a little bit of a break for Alabama. A lot of Tide fans will be there, but this is a rare, hard sellout. There are sellouts, but then there's rare, tough tickets for a day game at the Swamp. This is one of them. Florida fans are eager, and they think they've got a chance to upset Alabama today.
You saw how focused Bryce Young looked right there. He is a man who seems so prepared for the biggest of moments. Will he have a monster game in the Swamp? Here on CBS 42, we'll find out at 2:30. But for right now, we'll be right back on College Football Saturday.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
No doubt, one of the biggest topics of conversation all offseason has been the name, image, and likeness. They call it NIL in college football and other sports, and how it's all going to work exactly. Not many people have answers to all of these questions, so we brought in one man who might be able to answer some of our questions. His name's Nathan Kirkpatrick from the Sanford Brock School of Business. Nathan, I want to start with how this all began just this last year. How long do you think this has been coming into effect? When did you think this needed to happen back in the past?
You know, first, thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And I think there's been conversation around compensation of student athletes and the potential of that for decades. And it's been debated, and all kinds of ideas were thrown out. But I think a lot of people thought, no, this will not happen. We can't treat student athletes as employees. Well, what has shifted through a lot of different civic and social and political conversations is, no, we need to revisit this. And so to your point, in the last year, and really the last couple years, California started this off a few years ago when they said, you know what, legislatively in our state, we're going to create a law.
And it was a snowball effect.
And it was a snowball effect, and people call it different things. A lot of it was because of recruiting. So different state legislatures, who also are sports fans, they perked up and said, well, wait, if California is going to have this law, we need to also get a jump start on this.
Because you're going to be behind the 8 ball.
That's right, because it impacts how universities and athletic departments can recruit and how they can honestly communicate with student athletes about the potential for compensation. So where it came from was, since then, as of today, we have around 25 states that have NIL laws signed into effect. It's been a lot of recruiting advantage rush to say, let's get a law, because maybe we're fearful of everybody else having an advantage. And it's a dynamic process, and we're literally learning on the fly.
And that's what a lot of people are already upset by, is some states and some schools have a massive advantage. Do you feel like the NCAA is going to have to come out and have one rule across the board where every school from Alaska to Florida has to do the exact same thing? What's that going to look like?
I don't think it's going to happen soon, and I'll give you a couple reasons why. First of all, the NCAA kind of put a Band-Aid on this 4 to 6 weeks ago, and they said, you know what, or really even more than that, around July 1st, so a few months ago, they said, we're going to create a loose policy that says we're going to kick this down to the states, and state laws, you can legislate this, and if a state without a law, you can copy another state. So they really kind of punted on the issue. Now, the NCAA is looking to really Congress, and if you talk to conference commissioners and state legislatures, they would really like Congress to pick this topic up as well, which is interesting because you get into big government, small government debates. But in this case, a lot of the states who've created their own laws, or they have bills in proposal, they still know it's unequitable between states. And so if Congress would lay out one kind of uniform pathway, it would put a lot of administrators at ease. But to answer your question, the NCAA is taking so much heat already for the lack of leadership through the coronavirus, the lack of clear guidance in college football kind of pathway the last 2 years. I don't think they're going to come out and make any big decisions quickly. They're going to let this thing unfold.
Another concern people have is the likes of the Alabamas and the Clemsons are just going to go so far out of their way to get even better athletes and better recruits because they're already doing well at it. Do the little guys have concern here, or is this their chance to come up, rise up, and do exactly what the big boys are doing?
It does help smaller schools, so lower FBS schools, the bottom half of the top 65 in the power conferences, or FCS schools, like a Samford University. It helps them a lot in what we call non-revenue sports, which really, if it's not football or basketball, there may be an outstanding women's soccer player. There may be an outstanding track and field athlete. There may be an outstanding softball or baseball player. And so those smaller schools who would normally never get attention to that level of sport, now if they have a dominant player, like Samford putting some baseball players in the major leagues, which we've done, now all of a sudden a student athlete could have some compensation opportunity, and now that brings fan attention to a smaller sport that maybe was only a very small geographic notice. And now all kinds of people are following that person, following the Samford women's softball because that one player plays on that team.
Which is a great thing for them, an exciting time for some schools, and maybe a questionable time for others who don't really know how this is going to play out. Nathan Kirkpatrick from Samford's Brock School of Business, thanks for all of that fantastic insight. I'm really curious to see how this all plays out.
Well, thank you for having me, and anytime I can help, thank you.
All right, coming up on our pregame show, UAB's Protective Stadium getting a brand new look. We're going to show it to you coming up on the pregame show.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Burgess No Field's been home to a lot of great moments over the years, but recently, not a whole lot of conference championships that they're used to. They're hoping to rekindle the flame against North Alabama a few weeks before they begin play in their new conference, the ASUN. Meanwhile, UAB football is still trudging along with their new stadium, Protective Stadium, set to open up exactly 2 weeks from today at home against a Liberty team. And of course, everybody's so excited about this stadium, but the one thing they're looking forward to, as Catherine Mazzone reports for us today, the fact that this stadium means everything to the city for more than just football.
When you get up on it and you see just how big it is, it exceeds expectations.
Towering above Protective Stadium, for the first time, the venue's new branding brightens uptown Birmingham.
It's the culmination of hard work, right?
It's how many describe this ceremony to mark the occasion, where project partners spoke about working together.
Protective Stadium is a testament to the many local leaders, companies, and entities across the community who have come together to accomplish a shared goal.
It was a theme throughout the evening. From the partnership leaders say made it all possible to the literal gathering at the nearly completed Protective Stadium.
After, over a year and a half of really everybody being in this pandemic and a real challenging time for our city and our country and our world, it's exciting to see people back out again and coming back together.
State and city leaders agree the stadium will also serve as a catalyst for economic growth.
From a venue standpoint, these are the necessary investments you make to get the yield and return you need, not only for visitors and tourism, but to also support your citizens who live in this city.
Governor Kay Ivey says the state's future is brighter with Protective Stadium.
By attracting increased opportunities for entertainment and sporting events like UAB football and the World Games.
City leaders say this is a huge anchor, but it isn't where it ends.
For this city to continue to grow, we have to believe in economic development and invest in economic development opportunities.
Catherine Mazzone, CBS 42 News, local coverage you can count on.
UAB pumped up for that exactly 2 weeks from today. And I think Alabama fans are really pumped up for who they hope is going to be their new star running back. We show you the personality of Brian Robinson, a local Tuscaloosa kid, coming up next. Let's go inside the stadium at Ben Hill Griffin. These fans are really itching to get their teams out there. Pretty impressed with the way they've been filled up for 2 weeks.
Oh, absolutely. These Florida fans are hungry for a big home game. It's been a while. Alabama fans all over the place. Look at that. Big game for the Tide. Who will be the quarterback for the Gators? That's one of the questions today.
Just play some roulette on that because nobody has any idea. And I'm curious to see what's the ratio of Bama fans here.
Well, obviously more Gators, but you can tell Alabama finds their way into just about every stadium when the Tide's rolling.
We'll see you right after this break.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
It is week 2 in the NFL, and I think you fans are getting spoiled. We have back-to-back double headers here on CBS 42. The noon kickoff, the Raiders and the Steelers, followed by the 3:30 game, Tennessee trying to shake off that abysmal loss to Arizona last week. They're going to play the Seahawks in that evening, or afternoon slate, I should say. And it was hard not to recognize what went down with the 3 Alabama quarterbacks who played in week 1 last week. Tua Tagovailoa, Mac Jones, and Jalen Hurts. Of course, Tua and Mac played each other in a game where the Dolphins barely edged out the Patriots on the road. Impressive stats all around that.
Yeah, it really was. And Jalen Hurts throwing the ball 35 times, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions in that graphic right there. Boy, that was one of the big stories away from that Mac and Tua showdown.
This is like a win-win-win if you're an Alabama fan, or have your cake and eat it too, whatever you want to say, because no matter who does well or who does okay, you've always got a guy to root for with all this kind of stuff. So I'm going to pose 2 questions. Of those 3, who's going to have the best season and who's going to have the best career, because it could be 2 different answers.
Well, I mean, last week, Brees, Jalen Hurts had the best day. The best season, I'm going to go with Mac Jones, and the best career, I'm going to go with Mac Jones. The same answer there.
How
very
crazy
impressive
is it
in a loss.
How crazy is it to say that when you saw the way Tua Tagovailoa broke records 2 years ago?
Tua Tagovailoa, I thought, was an automatic star. I just think the system, the money spent by the Patriots to get parts around them, and just, Tua's body got beat up a little bit. He's not the same Tua, even though he's back from that injury. It just looks so bright for Mac Jones moving forward.
I say it all the time. Mac Jones' deep ball was so underrated, and the way he placed it in there. Jalen Hurts, is he a different quarterback than he was at Oklahoma? It feels like he already is.
He really is, and I just don't have the faith in that team around Jalen, but Jalen proves now that he can play at that level. He showed you this past week, and when they put that C on his jersey as captain, that meant a lot to him, and I think it took a lot of pressure off of Jalen Hurts, allowed him to do what he did last week. I just feel like when it comes to pieces around Jalen, he's probably third on the list with Tua and Mac at 1-2 there.
He's the easiest Alabama player to root for, that's for sure. And all of these guys, the success in the NFL, you know the current players are looking at that and saying, hey, I want to be that guy in the NFL, and we might have one on this team. Taylor Kaufman now back with us live from Gainesville.
Hey, Chris, all running back Brian Robinson wants to do is play football. And growing up in Tuscaloosa, the dream was always to play for Alabama and Nick Saban. So to get to the point that he's at now, it took a lot of hard work and patience.
It feels like a blessing, like for me to be here, like just right where I want to be.
Tuscaloosa native Brian Robinson knows exactly what it means to be part of the Alabama football program, growing up with Bryant-Denny Stadium right in his backyard.
Tuscaloosa, homegrown people, like, just, that means something to me every time I step on that field. And, like, I don't want to let my people down, like, right here at home.
He kind of heated up really quickly, I guess you'd say.
His high school coach, Sam Adams, said he saw his talent from the beginning.
You know, I was trying to contact college coaches like right away, like, hey, you got to see this Brian Robinson kid. I mean, he's a freshman right now, but he's a freak. I think it was the second game of his junior year, he broke the 6A single game rushing record. He went for, I think it was 435 yards in one game. Sometimes in the same day, you'd have, you know, a coach from Alabama coming in and a coach from Auburn leaving, and then somebody else from Tennessee's coming in right after. And it was really, you know, a madhouse.
Brian Robinson was the man, but when he came to Alabama, things changed.
He's been behind so many great running backs in a row, which is very common at Alabama.
He played, but he was never the guy. He played on special teams. He played some backup roles. He got some opportunity, probably not as much as he'd like.
A whole bunch of guys would have already left to go to another program, and I'm sure he could have done that.
Robinson didn't see much play time, but he decided to stay, keep his head down, and put in the work. And now he's back as a redshirt senior.
Just knowing like the role was going to change for me, you know, coming into this next year. It just mentally just, you know, drove me like in another direction to where, you know, I just want to go from good to great.
B-Rob's always showed tremendous maturity, you know, in his disposition on the team, how he could contribute to the team, and how he's improved as a player.
He probably could have come out last year and gone to the NFL and made some money, but, you know, he's got bigger things in mind than just that.
This winter, Robinson was the first member of his family to earn a college degree. And as he continues chasing his dream of being a top NFL draft pick, he's motivated by the people he loves.
I've been around so many people, and I get to see them like live out their dreams, and the fact that they can, you know, take care of all their family, like, no problem. And that's all I ever want to do. Just play ball was something I just love to do, and, you know, take care of my family, make sure they good too.
B-Rob, definitely an easy guy to cheer for, and one of the few upperclassmen on this Alabama offense. Chris?
Not an overreaction to say Brian Robinson's going to have a great year. And Jim, you ready to overreact about week 2 coming up here?
I love overreactions. I put them in my veins.
Well, when you've got Iowa as the hot topic, you know something good is going to happen. That's coming up next. We've talked so much about this whiteout at Penn State tonight that Auburn's going to face on the road. But their record really is not that intimidating in these games. They're 8-8 since this began in 2004. Alabama beat them in 2011. Remember that game?
Day game, but yes, it was a whiteout.
27-11. Auburn's hoping that would be a fantastic score for them tonight. We'll be right back.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Overreactions from week 2 of college football. Iowa feels like a Haley's Comet type team to me, Jim, because you know they're going to come around and be good once in a blue moon this year. Are they going to make the playoff? Is that an overreaction? Texas, are they ever going to be a power in the SEC? Will Michigan beat Ohio State this year? Who put that one in there? And then Georgia, do they have a quarterback battle with Stetson Bennett and JT Daniels? Two guys who are hurt right now, by the way. Which of those do you think is most likely to be true?
Aaron Rodgers, I will take most likely to be true there. Iowa will be a college football playoff contender for $200,
It
please.
seems like the rational thing to say here, because I'm not sold that Texas is going to be awful every year, because they can have their random 10, 11-win season and contend with Alabama or whoever's up there. So to say they never will be, not going to happen.
They could be LSU. They could be LSU of the SEC.
Which is fine for everybody but them. And then I look at Georgia. JT Daniels is the guy to beat. And Stetson Bennett's record against UAB, I'm sorry, it's against a non-Power 5 team. That doesn't count. Michigan, the only two stats you need to know about that, 15 out of 16 and 45 points on average for Ohio State in that. And you look at Iowa's schedule, they could easily be in the playoff.
Yeah, and defense travels, and Iowa's got a great defense. At least they've shown that so far. They've been proven in a couple of games. And like you said, I used the same analogy on our show the next round about Haley's Comet. It's like a comet. It's almost, you can set your calendar by it. Iowa's good, not good, not good, not good. Iowa's good, not good, not good, not good. It's a good year for Iowa. They'll contend. They may win the West.
I would love to have this answered about 13 weeks from now. What if Iowa goes unscathed the entire year? You know where I'm going with this. And they lose a close game to Ohio State in the Big Ten championship. Depending on what everyone else does, I know, fascinating conversation. Are they in the college football playoff as a 12-1 team who didn't win their conference championship?
No, Big Ten champion will get in Ohio State in that situation. And at that point, if you're Iowa, you're cheering that Georgia and Alabama are not unbeaten. Because if Georgia and Alabama are unbeaten in the SEC championship game here on CBS 42, both of those teams I feel like would go in because of Georgia's win over Clemson to start the season. Georgia and Alabama are sitting in the best place of any team in the country right now. They control their own destiny to the playoffs.
So many changes in college football. You have the name, image, and likeness stuff that everyone's trying to cash in on. One of those is Alabama wide receiver Ajay Hall. We're starting a new show with him this year on College Football Saturday. Getting to know Ajay, Alabama's freshman receiver, is coming up next.
Ajay Hall, we got a flag in the backfield.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday pregame, presented by Pepsi.
It looks like Sanford's found the perfect way to honor the late Bobby Bowden this year. The field at Seibert Stadium will now be named Bobby Bowden Field. That official dedication will be at next weekend's home game against East Tennessee State. Bowden played at and coached at Sanford in the 50s and the 60s. Okay, we've heard so much about name, image, and likeness the last year in college football, and a lot of these players are now turning to podcasts and digital shows. Well, CBS 42 very happy to announce that we are partnering with Alabama freshman receiver Ajay Hall. So this week, let's get to know Alabama's number 84.
Yeah, we're going to get to know you here pretty well on the Kid from Neptune podcast. I'm curious, where did the name come from?
As a kid, I always kind of like the outer space and the planets. And, my favorite planet was Neptune because, I actually studied a little bit of Greek.
Really?
And I kind of noticed Poseidon, which he was on Neptune. And since then, I kind of just took it as like people like I'm kind of out of this world type stuff. When I was in high school, I was kind of feeling real good. And I kind of labeled other people too, because there's a lot of other people that had better talent, same talent. Mm-hmm. And I was like you like that. Like you Kid from Neptune, you know what I mean? So I always took that as, a phrase or a saying.
I know you have a passion about, and one of the reasons why you wanted to do this show is to bring attention to high school kids right now who aren't getting attention and love. And I know you want to bring on some kids in high school sometimes throughout the entire year. We'd love to do that. Why are you so passionate about that?
Where I grew up to play football in Tampa, there's a lot of people that I could tell you that they are honestly have the best talent that I've ever seen. And I've been all around, Texas, Georgia, all the big states, all the good states with football, they're good too. But, I have a lot of people that would, I'd just be like, wow, like you deserve to be here.
So at Jai Hall, actually going to be joined by Kendrick Blackshire, another freshman linebacker for Alabama, number 40. Going to be fun to talk with both of those guys all season long here on CBS 42. All right, coming up next, our one-on-one conversation with Alabama Athletic Director Greg Byrne. You heard about NIL, but what about conference realignment? That alliance the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and the ACC have, does that affect future scheduling for the Tide? We're going to find out coming up next.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
Here's a live look at your boy, Jim. You think Richardson's got a chance to do something today against Bama?
Yeah, Anthony Richardson, Emory Jones, pick your quarterback there. But if Richardson's hamstring's good, I'd play him a lot.
Number 5, Emory. Will he get the start? Most likely, but we're probably going to see Richardson as well. Okay, Alabama AD Greg Byrne has a lot going on in his life right now, just like every other athletic director in the country. You've got conference realignment and name, image, and likeness. Well, we talked with Greg this week on our Saturday conversation. Is that changing the way these schools look at these student athletes?
You bring up something that's fair to say, okay, how is this changing our landscape in college athletics and serving our student athletes? And it has. And basically the NCAA came in right when NIL was coming online for a lot of states and saying the rule is you got to follow your state rule. And some states don't have a rule or a law. So, you know, that makes it pretty wide open on what they can do. But it is a reality. We need to support our student athletes through this and make sure we're following the state laws. But yeah, it is changing things. We're spending a lot of time on it.
It seems like the casual fans' random response to this is, oh, we're heading down the road of schools paying athletes. We're clearly not there. How would that even be physically possible for schools to pay their players and have everybody still be able to compete?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there will have to be give and take through that, right? You have to, if all of a sudden the model changes and how you use your resources changes, there'll have to be some decisions made on what college athletics looks like. And I don't say that as a threat, I think that's reality. And I've said this before, and I'm going to continue to say it. If you're on a full ride scholarship here at the University of Alabama, out of state, you live off campus, and you're on Pell, which a lot of our kids are on Pell Grant, you're getting about $29,000 a year cash in your pocket, tax-free. That's about a $42,000 or so a year job. Those are real dollars. And so it's something that I think should be part of that conversation as well when you're talking about what does that model look like going forward.
You got all the conference realignment. You've got Texas and Oklahoma set for 2025. Who knows when they'll actually come in. Now the other 3 conferences, the Big Ten, the ACC, and the Pac-12, the Alliance, whatever you want to call it, whatever it's going to be, they have said that they want to schedule games with each other. I looked at your guys' way in the future schedule. You've got 14 schools in those 3 leagues in the next 13 years.
Is that how many?
It's
Okay.
14.
Yeah, good.
Yep.
Appreciate you doing the research on that.
With a lot of home and homes. What if some of these schools like Wisconsin or Ohio State comes to you and says, well, we're going to play the ACC, we're not going to play you. Is that a realistic conversation? Well,
there's language in our contracts that we put in there on both sides that encourages the game to be played. There's significant financial penalties if that doesn't happen. We have already heard, I think when the Alliance commissioners had their news conferences, that their plan was to play the already scheduled games, and that's part of what makes college football so special. So we certainly plan on playing the games we have scheduled and see what's ahead for the future beyond that.
It kind of ties into what you said about the NIL, and is college athletics going to look different 5-10 years from now? It's unfair to ask you, are we heading to super conferences, because nobody has any idea how this unfolds. Mm-hmm. Are we getting closer to that now, the fact that all this has happened in the last 4 months?
I think college athletics has been evolving forever, right? And one of the things I said after the Alliance was announced was, the Big Ten, the ACC, the Pac-12 have all had teams join their conference, or and some have had teams depart their conference, right? And so this isn't anything that's earth-shattering as far as being new and different, that it's never happened before. You go back to teams have left the SEC. Tulane was a member of the SEC at one point, right? I think Sewanee was one of the original members of the SEC. They're not on our schedule anymore. And so that's something where college athletics will continue to evolve. What you don't know is who's going to pick up the phone and call you, which is what happened with Texas and Oklahoma. They showed interest in coming to the SEC, and the SEC, Greg Sankey, his job is to make sure we strengthen the SEC and make it be as strong as possible for many years to come. He rightly took that call, and I think anybody else would have taken the exact same call. So does that mean there's super conferences coming about? I don't know, because you don't know who's gonna pick up the phone and call. Maybe nobody does, and it stays stable for quite a while, which I think there's real value in that too.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
AP Top 25, Jim. Not a whole lot of change from last week. We saw Georgia go to 2 weeks ago with a win against Clemson. Not a whole lot of big Top 25 games this week.
No, but I do like that they gave Oregon and Iowa a lot of love for their big wins last week.
Makes you wonder if that's setting up a college football playoff discussion in the future here. One team that you will likely see in that playoff conversation, as long as they don't completely fall apart, is Oklahoma. But right now, this game against Nebraska, you would think against the lowly Huskers would be a blowout. Early on, it was not that. Oklahoma is trying to distance themselves right now, though.
Two great teams, as the great Keith Jackson would say, in the palace on the prairie, Nebraska is playing a little over their head right now. That's a bad impersonation, but Nebraska impersonating a quality football program today.
What was a one-score game just moments ago is now 23-9. Oklahoma has taken a two-score lead in the fourth quarter. So you think about the Cornhuskers right now, a team, going back to our conversation about best jobs in America, this is the exact same thing. To say, is Nebraska irrelevant in college football right now? Because we're not talking about kids who love the 80s and the 90s. Nebraska means nothing to people right now.
Yeah, they were a dynasty in the 90s and before that, back in the 70s when I was a little kid. But keep in mind, there was a time in life when Army was a dynasty, way back at the turn of the century, before we all remember the Y2K one, the Y1K one. Yale was a dynasty. Dynasties can go away. Nebraska has to fight hard to stop from slipping into the history books like Yale and Army.
Recruiting has just been the downfall. When you're in a fertile hotbed in the South or in the West, it's not an issue. Nebraska's having that issue right now, and they're finding it out the very hard way about their irrelevancy nowadays. Cincinnati is trying to do something that nobody in the non-Power 5 has done, make the college football playoff. One of those speed bumps could be today against Indiana, and Michael Penix finally showing up for the Hoosiers like we expected all year.
Yeah, slow rehab process from his injury. Iowa made him look really bad in week one. But boy, the transfer from Alabama, Ford running the football, Cincinnati banging it in there, and Cincinnati is trying to stay in the conversation for the playoffs.
And Indiana had a multi-score lead earlier in this game. Cincinnati has now come back and taken that lead. It's 17-14 there in the third quarter. Since he's one of those teams, and when you talk about never having been to a playoff for a non-Power 5, you also got to look at it this way. They're higher ranked right now than so many of those other teams in the past have been in this conversation. Is that good enough to help them, though?
It is if they are able to beat Indiana today and then in 2 weeks to beat a Notre Dame team that'll be coming off a tough game with Wisconsin. But if they don't win both of those games and stay unbeaten, they're out of the conversation. Should they go unbeaten and beat those teams, they're very much in the conversation because of what they did last year. For a group of 5 to ever get in, you've got to have a great year where you burst on the scene. You've got to back it up the next year by going unbeaten and beating a couple of Power 5 name brands. They get that chance this year with Notre Dame.
If Notre Dame goes 11-1 this year, then people are going to think about what Cincinnati could potentially do. In the SEC, Texas A&M calling an off week, playing at home against New Mexico. Of course, their quarterback is out this week, so they got a brand new guy, Zach Calzada, coming in for them with zero problem with New Mexico. You knew that would happen.
Yeah, but it's important for Calzado to get some confidence because they scored just 10. A good drive at the end to win it at Colorado. But this looks like Calzado will be the quarterback when you play Arkansas and eventually Alabama here on CBS 42. So you've got to find a groove offensively.
They're saying Haynes King, the original starter, going to be out for at least 5 to 7 weeks. Like you say, that says middle of October right there. It is 34-0 right now in the second half of that game. It makes you wonder, is Texas A&M now with that quarterback problem, are they the second best team in the SEC West? You're talking about Arkansas, you're talking about Ole Miss. Who is it behind Alabama?
Well, I will tell you, going into the year, Texas A&M was my second best team. But as we sit here today, I want to wait and see what Arkansas and Texas A&M look like as they get together here in a SEC on CBS Showdown. And I really want to see what happens to Auburn tonight as well in Happy Valley. I mean, if Auburn beats Penn State tonight on the road in the whiteout, the conversation changes about Brian Harsin's first team.
To me, beating Texas and the state they're in right now is like beating a lowly Notre Dame team if you're a Big Ten school or a Pac-12 school. It doesn't mean as much to me as it does beating another team who may have their act together. Right now, the resume, says Arkansas is the second best team in the SEC West. Let's talk 2 months from now.
That's right.
Is that going to be the case? I would say no.
I would tell you, though, Sam Pittman has a philosophy. Nick Saban has always said, what's the identity of our team? Let's find the identity of our team. Sam Pittman has found an identity. The Hogs have bought in. They run the ball well. The style they're playing with Jefferson at quarterback fits Kendall Briles Jr., the OC, the play calling, and they have really good linebackers, all who bought in as super seniors. The team could be dangerous. It's just a really tough schedule, maybe the toughest in America.
Amazing how different it was from Chad Morris just 2 years ago. That is crazy to think about. Of course, injuries will play a factor for almost all of these teams in the SEC if they want to make a run. And of course, we know of a couple of issues for the Alabama Crimson Tide today. So let's get a look at that injury report for the Crimson Tide. Taylor Coffin back there on the field live in Gainesville.
Alabama's defense is strong, but I'm sure they'd like the help of Will Anderson Jr. The outside linebacker left the Mercer game in the third quarter with a knee injury. He has been practicing, but the Tide just took the field and we didn't see him in pads, so we'll just have to wait and see until kickoff. But like I said, he has been practicing. It has been day by day, and we just don't know what his status is going into the game. Chris?
Will Anderson, I was told that he would be called doubtful today for this if it was an NFL game, so just keep that in mind too.
Doubtful is very different, and Nick Saban does handle his injuries exactly like the NFL with the terminology.
All right, we'll find out at 2:30 on the game of the week, but before that, we got to pick some games across the country. Jim and I will do that next.
This is CBS 42's College Football Saturday Pregame, presented by Pepsi.
You know you're getting close to game time when the players are out there in their pads. Kool-Aid McKinstry's had a fantastic couple of weeks for the Crimson Tide so far.
Yeah, Alabama looks good in those road whites, man. It's my favorite Alabama uniform, the roadies.
We're going to get to predictions on this Alabama-Florida game here in a little bit, but first, let's go to the Pac-12, where USC just fired their head coach, Clay Helton. Quarterback coach Dante Williams is the interim. They're playing at Washington State today with their head coach, very little known, Nick Rolovich. Upset for Wazoo. Is it called an upset given how bad USC was against Stanford?
I'm going to go USC here. I think you fired your head coach at a perfect time to where you can have a good season. I haven't liked the quarterback play at Washington State so far. Give me SoCal.
USC won this game by 25 points last year, and they had 5 yards rushing. What does that tell you about what Wazoo is going to be able to do? Unstoppable USC, they're going to win this game, no problem. Mississippi State is going to be playing at Memphis in a game that really is curious because we've seen Mike Leach's boys show a little improvement in a nice win over NC State last week, but Memphis might be one of those underrated teams to take a look at.
They really are, and what I like here is Memphis said to the Mississippi State fans, you can't bring your cowbells into the Liberty Bowl today. Can't do it. Got to leave those on the outside. That makes me mad. I'm going to take State, but this is going to be a scary game. Memphis can pull the upset, but I'm going to ride with Will Rogers and think the Pirate and Will Rogers can pull it off.
If he does well throwing the ball, you got to think Memphis has some problems. They gave up 50 points to Arkansas State. What does that tell you about what's going to happen in this game? I think Mississippi State gets the win. In the Pac-12, Arizona State and BYU an independent team, of course. Arizona State's ranked, BYU's ranked, one of the only ranked matchups this week. Arizona State is -2. You got to wonder, it comes down to Jaden Daniels on the road for Arizona State.
Well, I tell you see why I'm bad at this, because I'm going with the road team again. I want to take Arizona State here. BYU without Zach Wilson. Impressed with Hall at quarterback and Kalani Sitake's big win against Utah. But I have Arizona State to win the Pac-12 South. And this is not a Pac-12 game, future Big 12, Pac-12 showdown. I'm going to go with the fear of the fort guys.
I'm going to disagree. I think home field advantage means everything in this game, and I'm not really sure if Arizona State's going to have it mentally to keep it together on the road. Okay, the other big game besides Alabama this week, 6:30, Auburn on the road against Penn State. Two teams I know that we don't trust for certain reasons. Penn State whiteout hasn't been great. They're 8-8. Is it good enough solely on that to get a victory against an Auburn team who hasn't shown anything either?
This is an easy Auburn pick for me if the game's in Jordan-Hare.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be an easy Penn State pick for me with it being in Happy Valley, but not impressed with Sean Clifford. He has digressed from his freshman year to now. I'm not sure this team can run the ball and score the offense that the points they need to beat Auburn. I'm going to go with a slight upset here. Take Auburn, turning Sean Clifford over.
Outright win?
Outright win with Roger McCreary having the game of his life.
I'm going to go Penn State just because Clifford's going to be a game manager in this, and I think that's all they're going to need as of right now. Okay, the game of the week in the SEC. Alabama and Florida, two teams who know each other oh so well. But if you are the Florida Gators in this game recently, you're wondering what's gone wrong in the series lately. Well, clearly the Crimson Tide have had the superior talent. The issue is who is going to show up for the Tide as their superstar. And when I talk with Gary Danielson calling the game, he has the same question mark today.
I doubt that in this team that there's going to be an emergence of a Najee Harris or Devontae Smith. It doesn't appear that way to me. But who knows? I mean, it could change. But, the strength of Alabama is they have a lot of players, and they're going to play a lot of players, and everybody who gets on the field is very hungry. And, if your star's the quarterback, that's not the worst thing.
That is for sure. And keys to the game for the Crimson Tide. You're looking at the quarterback on the other side. Got to contain those scrambles.
That's right. Nick Saban loves to play an aggressive defensive style that opens the door for the quarterback to run. They'll be in zone more than usual.
They know they're the better team with talent. Limit those penalties. And then for Florida, don't turn the ball over. You can win a game at home.
You can, but Alabama's defense is one of the best. I'll take Alabama closer than the experts think.
So not beating that spread of 14.5.
No, inside 2 touchdowns.
All right, we're going to see you after the game of the week on our post-game show, 6 to 7. We'll have Nick Saban live on the air as Alabama continues to warm up here for the SEC on CBS. Game of the week. Our national coverage from CBS is next.